Thanks, Chuck. Man, I have this terrible problem called stage fright. You'll have to forgive me because I'm shaking like a leaf up here. But, the funny thing is I can be in the back with any one of you and we can have a conversation. I'm completely comfortable. Hopefully you're comfortable. But, I get up here and I'm all nervous. And just, last night I was thinking about the sermon. And anyhow. But the other reason, though, that I'm nervous isn't just because I'm up here in front of you and have this dumb thing called stage fright. But it's because we're dealing with the Word of God. And it's a huge privilege and an awesome responsibility that I don't feel prepared for most of the time. And that's really what it's about. It's not about me, it's about God, and I don't want to get in the way. And so He'll bless me, hopefully, and we'll get through this. But before we dig into the Word, let's do a little review. So for the past couple weeks, Mike was preaching out of Philemon, and we were learning about forgiveness. And forgiveness is tricky. It's really hard, because I'd rather have resentment. I'd rather be bitter. That's easy. But to forgive, that's hard. But it's part of the Christian life, and we're required to do it. And then, of course, last week, we learned a little bit more about Mark. We got to know him a little better. And he shared his testimony and how God has helped guide him through life, and that he wants Christ at the center of his life. That's something we all need to strive for. But today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about running. That's weird. I hate running. I hate it. A wise man once told me, you only have so many steps in your life, why waste them? I agreed. Yeah, we got a car, four-wheelers, stop walking around. But no, we're not talking about running a physical race. We're talking about a spiritual one here. And it's something that the Christian does, and we need to run this race, the race of life, the race of faith, in excellence. And so today we'll be in Hebrews, chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. I'll be in the ESV, and let's read that right now. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured for sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted." Man, what an awesome passage. So we see three main things here in this passage. First, we need to lay aside sins. Okay? Then we also need to, second, run the race, but run it with endurance. And third, we need to look to Jesus, keep our eyes focused on him, because he's our perfect example. But before we get to that, in verse 1, we have a problem. There's something there that we need to look closer at. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses." Well, we got to stop there. See, in college, I had a professor, and he said, make a fist with your hand. So put that to your head. Go like this. Context, context, context. Beat it into your head. Context. It worked. I'm still doing it. Context is important. Same with the Bible, same with our lives. How many times have you been in a conversation with someone, walked into the middle of it? What's going on? Same with the Bible. We walk into the middle of a passage. What's going on? So we have this word, therefore. It's extremely important. It makes us ask the question, what is it there for? Something easier to remember. Therefore is all this stuff that I've been talking about over here, now this. It's the culmination of that entire message. And so that brings us to chapter 11 of Hebrews. See, chapter 11, it's called the Hall of Faith. There are 16 heroes of faith from the Old Testament. So we have Noah, Abraham, Moses, and that's just to name a couple. And so there's 16 heroes specifically mentioned, and then a bunch of other references in there. So we're gonna look through a couple passages real quick, kind of summarize this chapter so we get an idea of what it's about. But I want you, as we're reading these, be looking for a theme. Be listening for a couple words that we're really trying to figure out. So we have Hebrews 11, 7 through 9. And that says, by faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him in the same promise. Let's skip ahead a little bit to verse 24 through 25. It says, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And a little bit further in verse 29 and 30, it says, by faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. So I hope you noticed a theme there. There was a word that was mentioned several times, faith. So each one of these heroes from the Old Testament, Noah, Abraham, all the others, they responded to God's call and his command in faith. So faith must be important. In this passage and in the ESV, it's mentioned 25 times. One chapter, 25 times. And it depends what version you have. It's 24, 26, 27. But the point is, it must be important. Whenever the Bible repeats itself, it says, hey, wake up. This is important. So faith is important, obviously. Verse 6 of chapter 11 says, and without faith, it is impossible to please him, that'd be God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. It's impossible to please God without faith. Man, faith is important. So I'm sure a lot of us would say, yeah, I understand faith. I know what it means. But just so we're on the same page, let's define it real quick. So in a general term, faith can be defined as complete trust, belief and conviction in something, many times something unseen. Well, in a biblical sense, what are we talking about? It's that faith is that complete trust and that belief in God. Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hope, that's kind of that faith in action there. But let's look at an example. See, we have this chair right here, and it can tell us that faith has 3 stages. See, the first stage of faith is we look at the chair and we go, well, there's 4 legs, there's a seat, it's a chair. We identify this is a chair. So the second one goes a little bit further. You know, I'm looking at the chair and I'm like, looks pretty sturdy. I think if I sat in it, it could support my weight. But see, the third step, it goes further. And it's really where the rubber meets the road, because you take that and you go into action and you sit in the chair. You have demonstrated your faith. Now, thankfully, the chair didn't break, or that'd be misplaced faith. But and we all did this morning. We all sat down without even thinking. That was a demonstration of our faith. See, chapter 11 is just that. It's the demonstration of all of these Old Testament figures' faith. So, with all that in mind, let's go back to chapter 12. The first part of verse 1 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. So now we can understand the therefore. Remember, the author just described all these heroes of faith. And they followed God's leading in that faith. See, we're not alone. If you think of this cloud of witnesses, think of when you've been in fog. It surrounds you. It's everywhere, right? These heroes of faith, they're the witnesses. So as we're running this race, remember, the rest of the verse talks about running a race. We've got to picture that. They've gone before us. They've already ran the race. So we can look to them as examples. We can use them as encouragement. We're not alone in this. Others have gone before us. And the other great thing, though, about these examples is they weren't perfect. They were flawed people just like us. So we won't turn there. I'll just kind of summarize it. But for example, in chapter 11, verse 11, we have Sarah. That's Abraham's wife. And it says that she had faith that she would have a son even though she was very old. And see, if you read the full story in Genesis 18, when Sarah heard the news that she was to have a son, she laughed. She said, I am way too old. It's not going to happen. But the story continues. See, when Sarah was confronted about her doubts, it says that in Hebrews, she had faith. So even though she doubted, eventually she came around and she had faith. That is encouraging. It's very encouraging. Because if you read in Genesis and Hebrews, you'll know that a 90-year-old woman had a son. And that son was named Isaac, and God's promise was fulfilled because she had faith, even though initially she doubted. And see, just like Sarah, we doubt. We have trouble with things. But we can still have faith, and God is faithful. See, another thing that I'd like to point out is obviously we know the cloud of witnesses. That's these Old Testament heroes that are our example. They've run the race before us. But as I was reading this, I couldn't help but think of the many people in our lives that are witnessing what we're doing. There's people everywhere. And is it clear by the way you live, by your actions, that you're trusting the Lord, that you're living in faith? Can any stranger say, wow, there's something different about that person? Something different about them. That's where we really need to strive. And it's a monumental task. But let's move on. See, the next part of the verse gets pretty difficult. It says, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. So we're going to break this up into two parts. So the first part is things that weigh us down, or the NIV says things that hinder us. Remember that we're running a race. The analogy here is we're running a race. So the last thing you want to do in a race is have extra weight, burden, things that are hindering you, getting you in the way while you're trying to get to the goal. And that reminds me of a story. When I was in high school, I used to do a lot of backpacking and hiking with a friend. And so one day, we didn't have cars at that time, and so his parents were in town, and they said, oh, we'll pick up your stuff if it's ready. So I had my backpack, they picked it up, and then later the next day I biked to his house, and we went out. Man, beautiful day. I mean, just gorgeous. Sun's in the air, we're hiking up the mountain, and we get to the top. And we're unpacking, and we're going to set up camp, and then we're going to go exploring. Man, this is a great day, great day. I reach into my pack, and I'm digging through it, and I pull out something. It's a rock, about this big, and it's got a note attached to it. It said, for bear protection. It's from my friend's dad. He had rooted into my pack, and he'd stuffed this rock in there. And I had hiked this entire mountain with a rock in there. Well, in backpacking, I didn't quite do this. I like the kitchen sink and all, but you're supposed to pack light. People will spend thousands of dollars to shed ounces. And here I am with this rock in my backpack as I'm hiking up. No wonder why I was tired. But see, that rock was unnecessary weight. Now, obviously, in this passage, we're not talking about rocks and backpacks, even though that's kind of fun. What are things that weigh us down or hinder us spiritually? See, these things might not necessarily be sins. It could be things that distract you. Maybe that's sports. Maybe that's your hobbies, your friends, your family. See, the problem is that none of these things are bad. A lot of these are really good. We would say family is excellent. Yes, family is excellent. But see, the problem is when we mix up our priorities, we change the order. We need to have God up here first, then our families, and everything else will fall into place. But when we start moving God down the list, everything gets confused. Because see, the verse says to lay aside every weight. All right, ditch the family. No. We're not supposed to ditch the family. God first. God first. The rest will follow. So remember, we're running the race. What other things weigh you down? Is it depression? Is it poor self-image? See, See, these are things that we need to think about. We need to analyze ourselves. These are really important things. So the second part is sins which cling so closely. And I really like how the NASB puts it. It says, sins which so easily entangle us. Man, that's a word picture. It's just like that extension cord or those Christmas lights that you just took down last week because we didn't want to do it earlier. So you wrapped them up. You wrapped up that extension cord, you wrapped up those Christmas lights, and then you put it away. And next year when we go to grab them, what happens? The instant you touch that cord, it's in a tangle, it's in a knot. See, sin is just like that in our lives. It gets close to us, and it gets knotted and tangled, and then we got to root through it. These we are commanded. We got to lay them aside. And it won't be easy. It's a conscious effort. We got to work on it. See, how can you be distracted when you're over here with your favorite sin, your pet sin that just keeps coming back time and time again? That one that, you've tried to get rid of, it's back again. How do we get rid of that? Well, sometimes we can't do it on our own. Obviously, prayer. Go to God. But what else can we do? Well, we can go to one another. Go to someone who you trust. Someone who can be your accountability partner, who can say, hey, how are you doing with this today? But we need to take the first step. So Hebrews 12, the last part of verse 1 says, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So we've briefly talked about the idea of running the race. But let's explore that a little closer. See, the instant you become a Christian, you're entered into this race. And it's not just for pastors, for missionaries, for people who went to Bible college. It's for all of us Christians. And this race, every Christian has to complete. So, if the Christian life is like a race, well, what kind of race is it? Is it a sprint? We're just going hard as fast as we can, and then eventually we'll just pass out and collapse? Or is it just, you're just a saunter, and I think, over here's a good spot for a nap, and the checkpoint, I'll get there eventually. No. See, the Christian life is a marathon. You can't just go 1,000,000 miles an hour or you're going to burn out. And you can't laze around over there because what race was run by napping? It's a marathon with a constant drive towards the goal. Every Christian is expected to complete this. And with that, we need endurance. So the dictionary tells us that endurance is the ability or strength to continue or last, especially despite fatigue, stress, or other adverse conditions. Stamina. Despite fatigue, stress, or other adverse conditions. So in this verse, the word race in Greek is called agon. And that is where we get the word agony from. See, this isn't easy. Life isn't easy. Life is messy. Life is hard. Sometimes we're in agony. And we can't do that on our own. So my first year of college, I went to Wisconsin Wilderness Campus in northern Wisconsin, and it was an intensive Bible and wilderness school. It was awesome. We got to go mountain biking, backpacking. We had these incredibly intense Bible classes. I mean, we did Genesis in 1 week, and then we did the next part of the Bible in a week, and it was a lot of work, but it was really good. And so on my second semester, we had a semester-long class, PE. Okay? Right next door to campus was the biggest cross-country ski race in North America, the American Birkebeiner. 55-kilometer race, which for us Americans is 18.5 miles. 34 miles. That's what it is. And for the finish of our PE classes students, we had to do a student version of this cross-country ski race. And I can't remember the exact distance, but 30K sticks into my mind, so 18.5, almost 20 miles we had to go. All right, so we're skiing. Well, the problem was, I really started to like skiing. It was fun. But I didn't want to race. It was a lot of work. And I had gotten terribly sick. And being the poor, stubborn college student that I was, I didn't go to the doctor because that would make too much sense. So here it is, race day. I'm ready to die. But we got to go. So here I am. I'm skiing away, hacked my lung up over there, ready to, I didn't think about endurance, finishing well. Go to the end, do what you can, finish strong with endurance. No, I wanted to crawl in bed and die, because that would have been easier. But you see, the Christian life isn't like that. We need to complete the race with endurance. We can't give up. See, I finally got to a checkpoint, and I said, what grade do I get if I end here? C. Perfect. I'll take it. I quit right then and there. Get me back home. I'm ready. I'm done. It was great. We can't settle for a C in the Christian life. We can't say, well, this is good enough. We have to keep going. But we can't do that on our own. See, when running the race with endurance, we need to lean on the Lord for his strength, because there's no way that we'll ever be able to do it ourselves. So, we need to lay aside every sin, the things that weigh us down, and we need to run this race with endurance, leaning on God for his strength, because we can't do it on our own. But what else do we have to do? Well, we need to look to Jesus, keep our eyes focused on him. So let's read the rest of the passage here. Hebrews 12, 2-3 says, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured for sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Remember, chapter 11, we had all these countless examples of the Old Testament heroes. And they're great examples that we can look at and follow what they've done and encourage us. But they pale in comparison to Christ, the perfect example. See, he's our ultimate encouragement. He came to earth. He lived as a man. He experienced hunger, pain, and sorrow. He ran this race that we're running, and he did it perfectly. We know he was tempted, and even though that happened, he laid aside that temptation. He ran the race with endurance even to the end, even though that meant death on a cross, a terrible way to go for our sins. That is someone that I want to emulate my life after. Perfect endurance. See, when times are hard, or as we just talked about, running the race, we're struggling, we need to keep our eyes on Jesus. And a few ways that we can do that, to keep our eyes on Jesus, is one, reading his word. If you have a relationship with someone, how do you get to know them? You talk to them. You can't get to know someone better without talking to them. Well, the Word is a very special thing because it's how we learn about God. And honestly, I'll be the first to admit I struggle with my Bible reading. It's easy to, I'm busy. But if we're not in the Word, how do we learn about God? Another way is through prayer. See, that's our direct connection. We're not just yelling at the sky, please, somebody, I wish you'd hear me. No, we have a direct connection to God. We're talking to him. And we're not just saying, it's not just when we need something. Man, life is really hard right now. I need you. No, we need to communicate at all times. Through the good, through the bad, through prayer. See, prayer is powerful. And when you fix your eyes on Jesus, your prayers will change. It's not what I want. It's what he wants. Priorities. See, we also need to remember what Christ did for us. He died on the cross to take away the sins of the world for me, for you. And so, when we think about the challenges that we have in life, and the challenges he faced, they seem kind of small, don't they? And that leads us into communion today. See, because communion is the time that we remember what Christ did for us. See, he died on that cross for our sins so we could be forgiven and redeemed. He ran the race. He led a perfect life. So as we take communion today, we need to analyze ourselves. We need to thank God for what he's done, but perform that self-check. Ask for forgiveness for those sins you haven't laid aside or the ones that you really struggle with, the things that are weighing you down. Ask him to help you run the race with endurance, with his strength. And most of all, ask him to help you keep your eyes fixed on him. Because when we keep our eyes fixed on him, we're not distracted over here or over here. We're keeping them on him, our perfect example. So as we take communion today, maybe you have a resentment in your heart. Maybe you haven't forgiven someone. You need to clear those things up. You need to go to God. I'll ask the guys to come forward, Bruce and Chuck and Mike, if you come forward, please. They'll be passing out the elements. And as you get that, just hold on to that for now. And let's be in silent prayer. Analyze ourselves. Ask him to help you run that race better. Help you lay aside those sins that you've been struggling with. See, now's the time. Keep our eyes fixed on Jesus.
Your eyes on the sparrow, and your hand it comforts me. From the ends of the earth to the depths of my heart, let your mercy and strength be seen. You call me to your purpose, as angels understand. For your glory, may you draw man as your love and grace demand. And I will run to you, to your words of truth, not by might, not by power, but by the Spirit of God. Yes, I will run the race till I see your face. Oh, let me live in the glory of your grace. And I will run to you by the words of truth, not by might, not by power, but by the Spirit of God. Yes, I will run the race till I see your face. Oh, let me live in the glory. Oh, let me live in the glory. Yes, let me live in the glory of your grace.
So Matthew 26 says, Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Let us do likewise. And he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin. Let us also do likewise. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity that we can just come here and learn more about you. Help us to remember what you've done for us, Lord. You're the perfect sacrifice. You ran this race perfectly. Help us to emulate you, that we keep our eyes focused on you, Lord. That we could run this race with endurance just like you did. And also, Lord, the sins that just keep catching us, tangling up, Lord, help us to throw those aside, that we could be more like you.